The slap echoed through the Seoul apartment like a gunshot. Kadi's head snapped to the side, her dark skin reddening where Jae-won's palm had connected. "You pathetic African woman," he spat, his face twisted with contempt. "What are you going to do about it?" What he didn't know, what nobody knew, was that the trembling woman before him had once been called the Black Mamba in underground fighting circuits across 3 continents. And after 5 years of swallowing her pride, Kadi was done pretending to be weak. Before we continue, hit that subscribe button right now. Comment below where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I want to know who's riding with Kadi on this journey. Now, let's get back to the story. 5 years earlier, Kadi Mensah had arrived in South Korea with stars in her eyes and scars on her knuckles. The 28-year-old from Lagos, Nigeria, had left behind a life she never spoke about, a life of underground fights, broken bones, and a reputation that made men twice her size step aside when she entered a room. But that was before the accident. Before her master, the only father figure she'd ever known, died in a fire at their dojo. Before she swore on his grave that she would never fight again. Seoul was supposed to be her fresh start. She found work at a small Nigerian restaurant in Itaewon, serving jollof rice and egusi soup to homesick Africans and curious Koreans. That's where she met Park Jae-won, a handsome accountant with gentle eyes and a warm smile that made her believe in second chances. Their courtship was a whirlwind. Jae-won showered her with attention, compliments, and promises. "You're different from Korean women," he'd say, stroking her braided hair. "You're exotic, beautiful, special." Kadi, hungry for belonging, interpreted his words as love rather than fetishization. They married within 6 months. Jae-won's mother, Mrs. Park, had opposed the union with venomous intensity. "My son marrying a black African? What will our family say? What will the neighbors think?" But Jae-won had insisted, and his mother's resistance eventually cooled to icy tolerance. The mask began to slip 3 months after the wedding. "Why is this food so spicy?" Jae-won complained one evening, pushing away the jollof rice Kadi had spent hours preparing. "Can't you cook normal food? Korean food?" "I can learn," Kadi offered gently, her Nigerian accent wrapping around the Korean words she'd worked hard to master. "Teach me what you like." "Forget it, you'd probably ruin that too." He stood up, grabbing his jacket. "I'm going out, don't wait up." It became a pattern. Jae-won would come home late, reeking of soju and perfume. When Kadi questioned him, he'd laugh in her face. "What are you going to do? Go back to Africa? You have nothing without me. No visa, no money, no family here. You're trapped." He was right about the visa. Her residence permit was dependent on their marriage. But he was catastrophically wrong about everything else. Kadi endured. She told herself that marriage required sacrifice, that love meant patience. She got a job at a logistics company, working 12-hour days while still cooking, cleaning, and trying desperately to please a man who seemed to hate her more with each passing month. The verbal abuse escalated. "Look at you, dark as midnight. I can barely see you when the lights are off," Jae-won would mock, his friends laughing along during their frequent drinking sessions at the apartment. "My mother was right. I should have married a proper Korean woman." Kadi would smile tightly, serve them more snacks, and retreat to the bedroom, where she'd stare at her hands. These hands that had once shattered concrete blocks, that had won 53 consecutive fights, that had earned her the nickname the Black Mamba for the deadly precision of her strikes. But she'd made a promise, never again. 5 years into this nightmare of a marriage, Kadi had become a ghost of herself. She'd lost weight, her vibrant personality dimmed to a flicker. At work, colleagues whispered about the bruises she tried to hide, bruises that came from accidentally walking into doors, from clumsily falling downstairs. Mrs. Park had become emboldened by her son's treatment of Kadi, visiting their apartment regularly to deliver fresh cruelties. "You've made my son miserable," she'd hiss, her wrinkled face contorted with disgust. "A monkey woman from the jungle, ruining our family's reputation." One evening in late November, Kadi arrived home from work to find Jae-won in the living room with a woman perched on his lap, a young Korean woman with porcelain skin and a cruel smile. They were kissing, his hands roaming freely, completely unconcerned about being caught. Jae-won, Kadi whispered, her voice breaking. He looked up lazily, not even bothering to push the woman away. Oh, you're home. This is Minjai. Minjai, this is the African help I mentioned. The woman giggled. I thought you were joking about being married to one of asterisk them. Something cold settled in Kadi's chest, but she kept her voice level. Please ask her to leave our home. Jae-won stood up, his 6-foot frame towering over Kadi's 5'6". Our home? This is MY apartment. MY name on the lease. You're just a guest who's overstayed her welcome. He stepped closer, alcohol heavy on his breath. In fact, I've been meaning to talk to you about that. I want a divorce. Minjai's pregnant. The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Kadi's visa, her entire legal status in Korea, depended on this marriage. You can't, she started. I can't, Jae-won's eyes flashed dangerously. I can't. That's when his hand flew, connecting with her face in a sharp, vicious slap that sent her stumbling backward. Minjai gasped theatrically from the couch, clearly enjoying the drama. Kadi's cheek burned, but it was nothing compared to the fire igniting in her chest, a fire she'd kept buried for 5 years. You pathetic African woman, Jae-won snarled, advancing on her. What are you going to do about it? Hit me back, he laughed mockingly. You can barely lift a frying pan without struggling. You're weak, useless, and I'm done pretending you're anything more than a... He didn't get to finish the sentence. Kadi's hand shot out faster than Minjai's eyes could track, gripping Jae-won's wrist in midair as he raised his hand for another strike. Her fingers pressed into specific pressure points, and Jae-won gasped as his entire arm went numb. What the... he started, but Kadi twisted, and suddenly he was airborne, his body flipping before crashing into the coffee table with a sound of splintering wood. Minjai screamed. Jae-won lay in the wreckage, stunned, staring up at his wife as if seeing her for the first time. How did you? 5 years, Kadi said softly, her Nigerian accent thicker now, emotion bleeding through. 5 years I made myself small, made myself weak. Made myself nothing so you could feel like a big man. She walked toward him slowly, and he scrambled backward like a frightened child. You want to know who I am, Jae-won? Ask anyone in Lagos about the Black Mamba. Ask about the woman who won the West African Underground Championship 3 years running. Ask about the fighter who put 5 men in the hospital when they tried to rob her master's dojo. You're insane, Jae-won breathed, blood trickling from his split lip. No, Kadi corrected, flexing her fingers that still remembered every form, every strike, every deadly technique she'd sworn to abandon. I was insane to think I deserved this treatment, but I'm thinking clearly now. Minjai had pulled out her phone, filming everything. This is assault. You're going to jail. Kadi turned to her, and something in her expression made the younger woman flinch. Show that video to anyone, please. I'd love for the world to see what happens when an abusive man finally faces consequences. Jae-won had recovered enough to pull himself up, his pride wounded worse than his body. You think you're tough. You think this changes anything. He grabbed a decorative vase from the side table. I'll smash your skull in, you African. The vase never came close to Kadi's head. In a blur of movement, she executed a perfect asterisk Ashiro Jerry asterisk, a back kick that caught Jae-won square in the chest, sending him flying across the room into the wall. He crumpled to the floor, gasping for air, the vase shattering harmlessly beside him. The apartment fell silent, except for Jae-won's labored breathing and Minjai's terrified whimpering. Kadi stood in the center of the destroyed living room, her chest heaving, every muscle in her body alive and singing after 5 years of dormancy. She looked at her hands, her powerful, capable, deadly hands, and felt something she hadn't felt in so long. Power, control, freedom. But the night's revelations were just beginning. Because at that moment, the apartment door burst open, and 3 people entered who would change everything Kadi thought she knew about her husband, his family, and the web of lies she'd been trapped in. And one of them was holding a gun. The gun was pointed directly at Kadi's head. Don't move, African bitch, commanded the man holding it, a stocky Korean with a jagged scar running down his left cheek. Behind him stood two other men, both wearing expensive suits that screamed organized crime. But it was the fourth person who made Kadi's blood run cold. Mrs. Park stepped into the apartment, her elderly face twisted with malicious satisfaction. "Perfect timing, Mr. Cho. As you can see, my daughter-in-law has finally shown her true violent nature." Jae-won struggled to his feet, still clutching his chest. "Mother, what are you doing here?" "Saving you from your mistake, as always." Mrs. Park gestured to the men with casual familiarity that suggested this wasn't their first meeting. "Mr. Cho and his associates have been very patient, but the deadline has passed, Jae-won. You owe them 50 million won. Kadi's mind raced. 50 million won, nearly $40,000. "Mother, I told you I'd handle it," Jae-won started, but Mrs. Park cut him off with a sharp laugh. "Handle it? You've handled nothing. You've gambled away your inheritance, embezzled from your company, and destroyed this family's reputation." She turned to Kadi with vicious pleasure. "But fortunately, your wife just provided us with the perfect solution." Mr. Cho stepped closer, the gun never wavering. "Self-defense," he said simply. "A violent foreign woman attacks her husband and his elderly mother. I, a concerned family friend, intervene. Tragically, she's killed in the confrontation." He smiled coldly. "Your life insurance policy is worth 100 million won, Mrs. Park, more than enough to clear your husband's debts and leave plenty for his grieving family." The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. This had been planned. The abuse, the isolation, the systematic destruction of her spirit, all of it designed to either break her completely or provoke exactly this kind of reaction. Either way, they'd win. Min-jae, still filming from the couch, suddenly made sense too. "You were recording evidence of my violent nature," Kadi said quietly, "to justify whatever came next." "See, not completely stupid," Mrs. Park sneered, "though it took you long enough to figure it out." Jae-won looked between his mother and Mr. Cho, something like fear finally entering his eyes. "Mother, you can't be serious. Murder? I agreed to the divorce plan, not." "The divorce plan failed when you got that stupid girl pregnant," Mrs. Park snapped, gesturing dismissively at Min-jae. "We needed a clean break with financial compensation. Your wife's death provides both." Kadi felt the familiar calm settling over her, the same calm that had descended before every fight in her previous life. She'd promised her master never to fight again, but he'd also taught her that a warrior's greatest duty was to survive. And right now, survival meant embracing the very thing she'd tried to bury. "You've made one critical mistake," Kadi said softly, her eyes locked on Mr. Cho's gun. "Oh, and what's that?" Mr. Cho asked, amused. "You brought only 3 men." What happened next occurred in less than 10 seconds, but to those present, it felt like an eternity. Kadi's hand shot up, deflecting Mr. Cho's gun arm with a sharp tegatana strike to his wrist. The gun discharged into the ceiling as she simultaneously drove her knee into his solar plexus. As he doubled over, she grabbed his head and brought it down to meet her rising knee, a devastating hizajiri that shattered his nose and sent him sprawling unconscious before his associates could even register the movement. The first bodyguard lunged. Kadi sidestepped, using his momentum against him, redirecting him into the wall with a perfectly executed Tai Atoshi asterisk throw. His head connected with the plaster with a sickening crack, and he slumped down, dazed. The second bodyguard, smarter than his companion, pulled out a knife. "I'll gut you slow, you black." Kadi's asterisk Mawashi Jerry asterisk, a devastating roundhouse kick, caught him in the temple before he could finish the slur. The knife clattered to the floor as he collapsed like a puppet with cut strings. The entire apartment had descended into chaos. Min-jae was screaming, scrambling toward the door. Jae-won had pressed himself against the wall, his face pale with terror. Mrs. Park stood frozen, her confident superiority shattered by the impossible scene before her. Kadi walked calmly to where Mr. Cho's gun had fallen, picked it up, and pointed it at the floor. "Nobody moves." "This is impossible," Mrs. Park whispered. You're just a weak foreign woman. You couldn't even stand up to my son's discipline. Your son's abuse, Kadi corrected coldly. Let's use proper words, grandmother. She looked at Jae-won. You want to know why I never fought back? Because I made a promise to the man who raised me. My master died because of violence. A rival gang burned down his dojo with him inside. His last words to me were, Kadi, promise me you'll leave this life. Fighting only brings more fighting, more death. Find peace. Her voice cracked slightly. So I tried. I came to Korea to be normal, to be soft, to be someone who didn't solve problems with her fists. I met you, and I thought maybe I could be that person. She laughed bitterly. But you couldn't even let me have that, could you? You had to push and push until you broke the very promise that was keeping you safe. A knock at the door made everyone freeze. Police! We received a noise complaint and reports of a gunshot. Min-jae, seeing her opportunity, lunged for the door. Help! She's crazy. She's trying to kill. Kadi was faster, yanking her back by her hair and clamping a hand over her mouth. One more word, and I'll show you what crazy really looks like, she hissed. To the room, she commanded. Everyone on the couch. Now, Mother Park, collect their phones. I will not. Kadi fired the gun into the couch cushion right next to Mrs. Park's foot. The old woman yelped and immediately started gathering phones with trembling hands. More pounding on the door. Open up or we're coming in. One moment, officers. Kadi called out in perfect Korean, her accent completely vanished under the pressure. She pointed the gun at Jae-won. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to tell the police this was all a misunderstanding, a domestic argument that got loud, nothing more. Min-jae's going to smile and confirm it. Mother Park's going to apologize for disturbing the neighbors. And these 3 unconscious gangsters, they're drunk friends who passed out. Understand. And if we don't? Jae-won asked, trying to reclaim some shred of dignity. Kadi smiled, and it was the smile of the Black Mamba. Cold, deadly, and absolutely certain. Then I tell the police everything. The insurance fraud conspiracy, your embezzlement, your mother's connection to organized crime, and we all go down together. Except I'll be the victim of domestic abuse defending herself, and you'll be criminals who tried to have me murdered. Which story do you think they'll believe? Mrs. Park's face had turned ashen. You have no proof. I have 3 unconscious gangsters, one of whom brought a gun to murder me. I have Min-jae's phone with video evidence of your son assaulting me. And Kadi pulled her own phone from her pocket. I've been recording every conversation in this apartment for 6 months. Every slur, every threat, every plan you've made. It's all backed up to a cloud server that opens automatically if I don't log in every 24 hours. It was a complete bluff. Kadi had no such recordings, but the horror on their faces told her they believed it. Last warning, the police were starting to force the door. Well, Kadi demanded, what's it going to be? Jae-won looked at his mother, then at the unconscious men, then at the determined woman holding a gun who he'd stupidly believed was powerless. We'll tell them it was a mistake. Smart boy. Kadi unloaded the gun, pocketed the magazine, and kicked it under the couch. She hauled Mr. Cho and his men onto the furniture, arranging them to look passed out drunk rather than beaten unconscious. Everyone smile. And remember, I've got nothing left to lose. You've already taken everything. But you have your freedom, your reputation, your futures. Cross me, and I'll burn it all down. Jae-won opened the door to find 3 stern-faced officers. Officers, I'm so sorry. Just a family disagreement that got loud. My mother gets passionate sometimes. We heard a gunshot, the senior officer interrupted, pushing past him to survey the room. Mrs. Park stepped forward with a practiced smile. A car backfired outside, officer. It startled us and we may have overreacted. You know how we elderly folks can be. She gestured to the drunk men on the couch. My son's friends had a bit too much soju. I was scolding him about it. My apologies for disturbing the peace. The officer's eyes lingered on Kadi's reddened cheek, on the overturned furniture, on the general disarray. Ma'am, are you all right? This was it, Kadi's chance to expose everything, to bring justice down on these people who'd tormented her. But she looked at the officer's skeptical eyes, at the way he'd already dismissed her as just another foreign domestic worker, and realized the system wouldn't protect her. not against a respectable Korean family with money and connections. Not yet. I'm fine, officer, she said quietly. Just a family argument, it won't happen again. The officer didn't look convinced, but without evidence of a crime or a willing complainant, there was nothing he could do. Keep it down, he warned. Next time there will be fines. After they left, the apartment fell into tense silence. Mr. Cho groaned, starting to regain consciousness. Kadi looked at each person in that room, her abusive husband, his venomous mother, the pregnant mistress, the would-be murderers, and made her decision. Here's what happens next, she announced. Jae-won, you're going to give me an uncontested divorce with a settlement of 100 million won, the exact amount of my life insurance policy. You'll write a confession of your abuse and the murder plot, which I'll keep as insurance. Mother Park, you'll transfer the deed to your Jeju Island vacation property into my name. And Min-jae, she turned to the terrified woman. You're going to disappear from both of their lives and raise that baby far away from this toxic family. This is extortion, Mrs. Park spluttered. No, Kadi corrected. This is justice. You wanted to kill me for money, instead you'll pay me to live. Poetic, don't you think? Over the next week, everything Kadi demanded came to pass. Jae-won, terrified and broken, signed every document. Mrs. Park, faced with the choice between her property and her freedom, chose freedom. Min-jae, realizing she'd been a pawn in a dangerous game, took a payoff and disappeared to Busan. The divorce was finalized within a month. Kadi walked out of the courthouse a free woman, financially independent for the first time in her life. She stood on the steps, looking at the Seoul skyline, and felt her phone buzz, an unknown number. Kadi Mensa? A woman's voice, professional. My name is Detective Han Soo-jin. I've been investigating Park Jae-won's company for embezzlement. I understand you might have information that could help our case. Kadi smiled. Apparently, one of Jae-won's colleagues had finally found the courage to report him. Detective Han, I have quite a lot of information. When would you like to meet? 6 months later, Kadi stood in her new dojo, a beautiful space in Itaewon decorated with both Korean and Nigerian flags. The Black Mamba's Self-Defense Academy read the sign in Korean, English, and Yoruba. Young women, both Korean and foreign, filled the space, learning not just to fight, but to reclaim their power. Jae-won was serving 5 years for embezzlement. Mrs. Park's assets had been seized in connection to her ties with Mr. Cho's criminal organization. Mr. Cho himself was serving 15 years. And Kadi? Kadi was finally keeping both of her promises, honoring her master's memory by teaching others to protect themselves, while never again making herself small for anyone. The Black Mamba had returned, and this time she was here to stay.